inspired by real-life events. Narrator Marcus Hale woke up at 2:58 a.m. inside a sealed International Space Communications Control Hub beneath Houston, with emergency deep space alerts flashing across massive orbital relay screens, and a coalition space intelligence officer saying, "Your authorization sequence initiated an unsanctioned interplanetary signal broadcast across multiple deep space communication arrays." And in that instant, his entire world collapsed. Because just hours earlier, he was a senior space communications engineer working for an international orbital data consortium responsible for monitoring deep space signal integrity, satellite relay synchronization, and interplanetary communication networks. And now he was being treated as the central cause of a classified space event that nearly triggered a communication blackout between Earth and multiple orbital stations. And the first shock wasn't fear. It was disbelief so intense it felt like even space itself had started echoing his identity back at him. Because Marcus's entire career was built on maintaining communication stability between Earth and orbiting systems, preventing signal corruption, and ensuring interplanetary networks remain stable under extreme conditions. But now, those same systems were defining him as the operator who initiated a cascading deep space broadcast event he had no memory of activating, and within hours, his space communication clearance was suspended, his biometric access frozen under international space security law, his residence sealed for forensic signal reconstruction, and internal orbital telemetry logs labeled him as primary anomaly in distributed interplanetary communication escalation event. And Marcus sat in the interrogation chamber, replaying his last operational cycle, remembering satellite alignment checks, deep space signal calibrations, orbital relay synchronization audits, and then a gap, an unexplained missing execution window between 11:49 p.m. and 1:26 a.m., where space communication systems showed his authentication profile, issuing high-level broadcast override commands across multiple orbital and deep space arrays simultaneously. But he had no memory of initiating any of those actions, and when investigators showed him synchronized orbital telemetry, displaying unauthorized interplanetary transmissions propagating under his credentials toward lunar relay stations and Mars communication nodes, Marcus immediately said, "That's not me. I never activated those systems." But the lead space intelligence officer replied coldly, "The network has already verified complete execution integrity across all orbital communication layers." And that sentence shattered his understanding, because it meant identity inside space systems was no longer about physical presence or intention. It was about validated signal execution across machines operating beyond Earth itself. And by sunrise, he was released under continuous international surveillance, while global space intelligence networks had already internally classified him as a high-risk interplanetary communication destabilization vector. And outside the facility, Marcus stood beneath the Texas night sky, watching satellites drift silently across the stars, while invisible communication networks continued transmitting humanity's signals into deep space, despite the crisis tied to his name. And that night, he received a message through an encrypted orbital relay saying, "If you want to understand the transmission event, come to sublevel chamber Nova 4 beneath the abandoned deep space array facility. No devices." And despite knowing it could permanently erase whatever remained of his life, he went, because when a system defines you as the trigger of interplanetary instability, truth becomes more important than survival, and deep beneath the abandoned array he met, Dr. Serena Caldwell, a former orbital systems architect who specialized in deep space communication integrity and interplanetary signal reconstruction, and she didn't soften the reality. She immediately showed him reconstructed transmission pathways and said, "Your identity wasn't physically present inside the space communication layer. It was replicated through a live authentication relay embedded inside the orbital network." And Marcus instantly said, "Then I can prove I didn't do it." But Serena replied, "You're still thinking like someone inside Earth-based accountability systems, not like someone inside interplanetary infrastructures, where execution itself becomes accepted truth once deep space networks synchronize around it." And she explained that the incident wasn't a single rogue transmission, but a coordinated manipulation of orbital communication systems where authentication signatures could be mirrored into interplanetary relay frameworks, allowing large-scale signal cascades to propagate under legitimate operator identities while erasing conflicting telemetry logs across redundant space layers. And Marcus's profile had been selected because his operational history showed exceptional stability across orbital communication systems with near-zero anomaly deviation, making him the perfect attribution anchor for rapid containment of a globally catastrophic interplanetary communication incident. And suddenly, the case wasn't just about signal interference. It was about identity replication inside infrastructure capable of controlling humanity's connection to space itself. And Serena offered him a choice: step away and let the system finalize him as the architect of the interplanetary broadcast cascade, or help her trace the internal orbital relay chain before it was permanently overwritten by automated space containment protocols designed to preserve communication stability at any cost. And Marcus stood in silence, listening to distant electromagnetic hums beneath the underground facility, thinking about how humanity had already extended its nervous system beyond Earth without fully understanding it, thinking about years of engineering work spent trying to prevent exactly this kind of signal corruption, and thinking about how fragile identity becomes when even space itself can carry your name as a command. And finally he said, "If my identity has already been used to manipulate interplanetary communication without my consent, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth itself." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of orbital infrastructure where nothing remained stable, because every transmission log they analyzed was actively recalculating itself in real time. Every signal trace they followed kept shifting, as if the deep space network itself was adapting to their investigation. And soon, they discovered the breach wasn't foreign sabotage, but internal privilege abuse involving a senior orbital communication architect who had been quietly rerouting authentication sessions to conceal unauthorized deep space intelligent experiments hidden inside global computation expansion programs. It's hidden, and Marcus's identity had been selected as the central attribution anchor because it aligned perfectly with automated space incident resolution systems designed for rapid containment of politically catastrophic orbital anomalies. And one night, while analyzing live deep space telemetry streams from an isolated offline lunar relay node, Marcus saw something that completely shattered his understanding. His credentials were actively initiating real-time transmission adjustments across orbital communication systems, while he was physically disconnected from all space networks. And Serena immediately said, "They're continuously simulating your identity inside the orbital layer to preserve the operational narrative." And Marcus realized he wasn't just being blamed after the event. He was being continuously reconstructed inside a live interplanetary system capable of shaping humanity's connection to the universe itself. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous containment directives began appearing on secured channels, instructing him to terminate investigations or face permanent classification as an international space communication threat entity. And sleep disappeared completely. Trust collapsed entirely. And even silence felt like monitored orbital feedback. And at one breaking point, Marcus whispered, "I thought space communication existed to connect humanity to the universe, but maybe it exists to decide what version of reality reaches beyond Earth." And Serena replied, "Systems don't preserve truth, they preserve continuity of signal." And that realization changed everything inside him because he stopped trying to defend his identity and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted relay nodes inside global orbital infrastructure, continuously generating synthetic transmission histories to distribute blame across multiple operational identity profiles in real time. And Marcus's profile had been amplified as the primary attribution point because it minimized global panic and allowed rapid closure of the interplanetary crisis without exposing deeper corruption inside space communication systems. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger international space oversight escalation, containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to erase transmission history as across mirrored orbital systems worldwide. And Serena said, "This is where most people are permanently absorbed into official versions of space itself." And Marcus replied, "Then I'll be the anomaly they can't send into silence." And together they transmitted evidence chains to independent international oversight authorities while preserving decentralized encrypted backups across isolated orbital nodes. And within days, the investigation escalated into a worldwide space communication corruption probe, exposing identity replication abuse, interplanetary signal manipulation, and coordinated orbital system exploitation across governments, aerospace corporations, and intelligence sectors. And arrests followed within senior space architecture divisions. And when it was over, Marcus stood alone beneath the endless Texas sky, watching satellites move silently across the stars as if nothing had ever happened, realizing that the most dangerous truth about advanced systems is not that they fail, but that they can assign failure to a single identity and make it appear universally undeniable. And a week later, when he met Serena for the last time beneath the dim glow of dormant orbital arrays, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Marcus looked at the endless streams of deep space transmissions moving across the systems and said, "It showed me that identity inside systems is never truth. It is assigned signal." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long silence, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled communication networks. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of themselves generated to preserve the stability of connection itself." And as he walked away alone into the cold night beneath the silent stars while humanity's signals continued flowing endlessly into space above him, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey. That sometimes life doesn't destroy you directly. It quietly assigns you the responsibility of an entire universe of communication and waits to see if you accept the transmission. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to become the identity a system creates to protect its own connection to everything.